Welcome back in, Geico Outkick Studios, joined now by Barrett, Sallee as we roll through an upcoming, hopefully, pretty packed college football schedule. Also, the NFL obviously rolling as well. Barrett, you're down in Atlanta. Does it feel crazy? Are you ready for double Senate campaigns? I know you're excited.
Can't wait for more commercials. Good. They've already started. All of these candidates have killed people. They're all the devil.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like
it is kind of wacky. I was reading an article the other day, and it was talking about, I think they spent $150 million in South Carolina and in Maine and in all these different states. They literally have reached the point where they raise so much money that they don't even know what to do with it, right? I mean, they buy every single – I'm sure it's great, the fact that you have double Senate campaigns still going in Georgia. I'm sure it's great for local television dollars.
Dude,
but honestly, they literally can't spend the money that they are raising because people are just like, I can't even imagine, because people are so tired of the election already. And then you guys get 2 more months of it after everybody else all over the state of Georgia.
Do you know how much I would kill for like a My Pillow commercial or a Liberty Mutual, like that Liberty song?
Yeah.
I would kill for those commercials at this point.
Yeah.
And yet they're not.
Especially, I'm sure that during all the sports that you're watching, it's all Senate campaign ads pretty much, right?
Oh,
I mean, because they just
awful.
they have to spend the money somehow, and there's only so much
and people
programming
watch
they can
live
put it on.
sports.
Yeah,
like,
that's right.
People watch live sports, and they have to watch the commercials. Oh, God, it's awful. It's awful.
All right, so let's dive into what's not awful, college football. It feels like, and I feel like I need to knock on wood all around and everything else, feels like this week in terms of the SEC, the ACC, the Big 12, the Big 10, and the Pac-12 is going to have less cancellations than last week. Are we through the worst of it, you think, or do you think there's still major issues on the horizon just in terms of being able to play games between now and when theoretically the conference championship games will be played about a month from now?
I think we're still in some trouble. Not necessarily the number of teams. I think that's going to probably continue to go down, but it's the impact that any cancellations will make, because you've seen, you follow this, more than anybody, that the numbers are rising. Like the case, whether we could argue what, the validity is and how, what the death rate is, all that stuff, but they're still rising, right? And so really that's all that matters in terms of, even if these kids are asymptomatic, they still have to sit, they still have the contact tracing rules, and there's a smaller window. And I think that's the biggest thing, is that let's just say Ohio State has positive tests next week in contact tracing or whatnot, then you're talking about the second half of their season essentially being in jeopardy, right? So I think that's the biggest thing now. Even if there's fewer games canceled per week, the impact, especially if they involve teams in the college football playoff race, will be far greater than they have been, through the first few weeks of this.
So this is kind of interesting. Yesterday on the radio program, I got into what I think is a pretty fascinating question. You were a big part of paying attention and being involved in all the people who said it's impossible to play college football, right? You saw what I call the Corona Bros, the argument that it was impossible to play college football in the fall. Those people, I think, have been proven wrong to a large extent. But I haven't seen a single person saying you can't play college basketball. And I'm just fascinated by the dichotomy between the two. Because if anything, if you're arguing you can't play college football, I obviously disagree with you. But college football primarily being played in the fall, outdoors. College basketball primarily being played in the winter, indoors, requiring abundant travel, right? Whereas the average college football team doesn't really have to travel very much. They don't have to stay in hotels very often. You're on a plane a lot of the time, or on a bus, traveling, hotels, all those things a lot with college basketball, far more than college football. And you're indoors during a time when the viral spread, regardless of what the virus is going to spread a lot worse in the winter than it is during the fall or the spring or the summer for sure. Why have those arguments not been made? college basketball is going to start next week, and I'm in favor of it being played, but I just find that divergence, that dichotomy to be so fascinating. Why has there been no argument against college basketball, and there were so many people arguing against college football?
Because it doesn't drive clicks.
Do you think that people just care so much more about college football?
Yeah, and I think partly, look, I think that and I'm not that's not necessarily a criticism of those. I mean, I guess it kind of is, but if let's just say that I think that I'm one of those Corona Bros that you call them. If I want to make my point, like right, if I believe everything that I'm writing and I'm saying, my vehicle to make my point is far big. It's a much bigger microphone for college football. Like if you're talking about it in the context of college football. So, I think if people want to believe, people will believe whatever they want to, right? Like, and it's become political, which is stupid. But if I truly believe something one way or the other, I don't think using college basketball to deliver it will make as much of an impact as college football. And I think that's proven, right? Because think about how much we talked about college football in June, July, August, right? When they weren't playing. A ton. Like it was all about how are you going to do college football? How are you going to do classes? What are you going to do if they're online? All that other stuff, right? We don't have that with college basketball because obviously it's not as popular and it has been drowned out. So if we talk about it, with the context of the preseason, the NFL's there, the college football's there. We had, baseball wrapping up, a few weeks ago. It's just the microphone is not as big. So even if you do believe all of the things that whatever your opinion is, whether it's over exaggerated or it's far worse than they're saying, whatever it is, you're not gonna use basketball to deliver it because it's not going to be impactful.
Also, I think it's probably to some extent that they've recognized they're not going to win the battle, right?
Well,
and
that too.
The election is over, notwithstanding the way we started this conversation with everything still going on in the Georgia Senate.
Is not over in Georgia.
Yeah, I know. The election is not over if you're still living in Georgia. You got to go all the way. What is it, January 5th that you guys have to wait till now?
God, it sucks. Yes.
And you'll probably have another recount, another 2 weeks there. So you're probably talking about almost all the way through January before people in Georgia can escape politics. It'll be almost time.
Why do you hate me? Why are you?
It'll be almost time. It's almost time for the midterms by the time you guys get everything resolved in Georgia. All right, so we're talking to Barrett, Sallee. All right, let's go into college football. Right now, if you were voting, who should be the Heisman Trophy winner, and how do you think your answer is likely to change between now and when the season is complete, if at all?
Right now, I'd say Kyle Trask. I think what he's done to that Florida offense and how he's handled the absence of Kyle Pitts and, not missed a beat, whether it be the second half of the Georgia game or really the last three quarters of the Georgia game or last week against a pretty good Arkansas defense. He's so good. He has so much command of that offense. He knows where to go with the football. He makes changes at the line of scrimmage, which is rare for a Dan Mullen offense. And, I just think that matters. Mac Jones is in that conversation too. So I guess if something's going to impact it, it might be a head-to-head matchup between those two in Atlanta in the SEC championship game. Trevor and Justin Fields, I think the problem with them is they're not getting, the scarcity is going to come back to hurt them. Because if you see Mac Jones and Kyle Trask do it for 10 games or 9 games or 8 games or whatever, and you see Trevor do it in 6 or 7 and Justin do it in 5 or 6, that does matter. It does. And then especially, I think the competition in the SEC obviously is tougher too. So I think Kyle Trask and Mac Jones head-to-head will do a lot towards changing my opinion. And I think maybe they have to lose, not play games for Trevor and for Justin to catch back up, because I think Kyle's done it for so long already. I guess the one thing also with that could be Kyle Trask fatigue. All right. So if he marginally struggles against, Alabama, or if he marginally struggles against LSU, a bad LSU defense, then that might have more of an impact, not necessarily for me, but I think maybe from a lot of folks in terms of recency bias and just kind of, how it naturally at the end of the season, people kind of try to look for somebody else to sort of focus on.
So one of the challenging things you just hit on is difference of games, difference of quality of competition, even more magnified this year than it usually is, right? Because we'll sit around and we're like, okay, how do we assess this Ohio State 12-game regular schedule compared to Alabama or whoever it might be? Now we're going to be potentially comparing a 11-game season maybe in the SEC versus a 6 or 7 game season in the Big Ten versus a 5 or 6 game schedule in the Pac-12. How do you think the College Football Playoff Committee will end up assessing things, and who do you anticipate will end up in the playoff at this point in time?
I think the way that it's going to be eye test way more than anything else, because you really can't use strength of schedule. Because it's all strength of schedule is going to be all about the eye test, right? So you that sort of ingrained in each other. They're kind of weaved into the same conversation. So I think you're going to have that more than anything else. I think you're going to have obviously wins and losses, but I think style points are going to matter more for the Pac-12 and the Big Ten because of scarcity than the SEC, ACC, whatever. So I think it's the teams that are, up there right now, if chalk holds, that's going to matter a whole lot more because it's going to be hard to talk yourself into Texas A&M. It's going to be hard to talk yourself in to BYU or somebody like that. So the teams up there right now, Clemson, Notre Dame, Alabama, Ohio State, Florida, I guess Texas A&M do it to an extent, but they're blocked by Florida. They're not blocked by Florida. They're blocked by Alabama. You're at a massive advantage if you've already got that going for you because clearly the eye test is also in your favor.
Do you think that we will end up in a situation where the College Football Playoff Committee announces the College Football Playoff on December 20th? In other words, do we play the conference title games as they are presently constituted and scheduled on December 19th, or do you think there's a schedule change?
I've been back and forth on this. I would say I am about 60-40 that it goes on as scheduled right now. Although there have been obviously some games later this week that have been canceled as well. But I just think that they're not going to want to make a decision this late on something as big as the college football playoff, which I think incidentally is not the way you should approach it. But if I had to guess, I would say they just kind of go along with it the way it is because they don't know. It could be worse, if they delay it, right? Like, what if more games get canceled on December 12th or December 19th? They have the conference champion. It's just you might not be able to play them. So I think at some point you have to say, okay, let's just rip off the Band-Aid. Let's just do it. It's going to suck. It's going to be messy, but this is the way it's going to be this year. And if that ends up not being the right decision, okay, fine. But it's the more appropriate decision right now. You can't make that decision and look back in hindsight. You can't do it. You just got to make a decision and go with it. And right now, I think it's going to be that everything goes on as scheduled. We're
talking to Barrett, Sallee, CBS Sports. As a part of that, there has been a discussion, hey, should we expand the overall college football playoff? And the argument for why it should happen is what we just talked about, the difficulty of assessing overall teams, the fact that certainly there are Pac-12, let's say, for example, going to get left out, barring almost something crazy. Same thing with the Big 12 champion, all those things. The argument against it is 8 teams have way more things that could go wrong than 4 teams do, which is why I'm in favor in general of expanding the playoff to 8. I don't know what your perspective is on that, but I think this year is the wrong one to even consider it because of all the difficulties. I think 4 is the right number to hit. How would you assess whether expanding the playoff makes sense, and do you agree with me that going to 8 this year makes it way more complicated?
Well, I agree with you that it makes it way more complicated, and I'm vehemently pro 4-team playoff, like just in general. I think the 8-team playoff is awful, would be awful. But, definitely this year because you almost need scarcity. Because you're right, it would lead to, if you have more teams, and I think we all know there's a massive difference between the top 4 and then the potential next 4. that come in, right? Like it's just there's a massive difference between those teams. So if you're just expanding for the sake of expanding, you're giving yourself more of a problem, or at least a threat of a problem with COVID once those teams, go play their games and travel and do what they got to do. So I do think if you keep it at 4, and you can create a pseudo bubble, you can get them out there for a week, whether it's California or New Orleans, and literally keep them in a bubble. Not don't send them to these children's hospitals. Don't send them to Bubba Gump Shrimp and have an eating contest. Like you just don't. And that I think is a lot easier. So. Yeah, I totally agree with you. If you expand it, you're asking for way more problems, and you're creating more problems that you really don't need to be created, that you're doing just for the sake of access, which just doesn't make sense to me.
We haven't talked a lot about this on the show, and I bet you haven't talked about it that much either because it hasn't been a primary topic of discussion. Do you think the bowl games are going to go off as normal? And here's why I asked that question. Because I think when you look at the calendar, we know that kids were tempted by Halloween, and we got Thanksgiving, and we'll see how that goes next week. And then you've got Christmas, and kids are all going to go home. They're going to be around their relatives. I understand that teams are going to say, oh, we got to be careful with that. But it seems to me that the possibility of having positive tests is going to skyrocket in the wake of Christmas. And given that many bowls will be played after Christmas, it seems to me that's going to be almost impossible to police in terms of being able to play these games as scheduled. The bowl season seems like a total recipe for a mess.
It does, especially if cases continue to skyrocket or whatever, and you get back, like kids get back to campus after Christmas break, and there's there's 1 or 2 positives, and more positives from family members, and then once they get back to being around their teammates, they contact tracing is going to be even more of an issue. So yeah, I think you'll have some bowl games, but I could foresee a situation where after a couple weeks they're just like, what, screw this. Like it's not. I know the TV folks need content, and these are TV shows, but if you're having half of your bowl games canceled because you're getting too many positive tests or contact tracing the week of the game, like that just seems unnecessary. So I'd be floored if you don't have, I would say, what do we have? We're down to like 35 after some bowls, already canceled. It wouldn't surprise me if we're down in the high teens in terms of games that are actually played.
Barrett, Sallee, I appreciate the time, my man. Appreciate you getting up early with us here on a Friday, and we will talk to you hopefully in the near future. Hope you enjoy those television advertisements, and good luck.
Please, my pillow guy, come back. I miss you.